So what we're going to do now is our five panel members. I think we need one more. Pardon? Oh, she had to go. Okay, four. Our four panel members are going to come up here. There are some cordless microphones, and I'm hoping they will come up, take seats right now, and get a conversation going. And if you in the audience would like to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to come around. And also I would ask that you give your name and perhaps your affiliation. And then we hope to have, say, 15 minutes or so of lively conversation.
I'll speak loudly.
There we
okay,
go.
There you go. Okay. I'm Dr. Michelle Thomas. I'm CEO of a small company, G-Food for You, which is a sustainable development country looking to green the urban environment and look for mixed-use property to integrate with urban agriculture. I enjoyed all your presentations, and I'm sorry the educator is gone. One of the things in terms of my training, I'm a physician by training, as well as trained in aquaponics and commercial urban agriculture through an affiliation with Mr. Will Allen in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But one of the things when we talk about equity and we talk about the future of cities, since 50% of this increasing population is going to be in the urban environment, how much production of food can be created is very much dependent upon the ability of future citizens to be able to solve problems. And one of the things that I would propose, all of the good works that's going on is really encouraging. Some of the sad things that I do see is that the ability of public education and what it's doing in this country in particular is not creating enough citizens with skills for inductive and inductive thinking. And so my recommendation for all of us who have the foresight to see the future, and certainly those who have been able to share with us the history of where we've come from and how far we want to go forward and want for our children, is to say that mathematics is the salvation. And by that I mean that what happens in mathematics in this experiential educational experience that we should be advocating is that children learn to solve problems. Children become equalized. And it's sad to say that in the United States, only in Massachusetts are 50% of the students proficient in math. And it's not just about computation, it's about deductive and inductive thinking. And so that's what I want to say in terms of these different structures that have to be created. The children have the capacity. And then I feel that we would be well served, that they will have the courage to know that there are problems to solve, the ability to think and address some of these issues. I also just want to say that I've heard a lot about hydroponics, but I think aquaponics, because water is so critical, that aquaponics does a better job in terms of water conservation than hydroponic systems. So.
Well, just jet lag coming from home. Just outside our street in Stockholm, Katarina churchyard, there is a small garden where the local school is growing vegetables and flowers and harvesting every year. So of course that's a small example just where I happen to live of how to involve school children themselves. We heard very much now, much more eloquent examples here. And I do think that the kind of vertical greenhouses that Plantagon plans, they should, of course, that is part of our plan, to be also research and development centers, and also places where you invite local farmers to around them. You said it was on. where you invite local farmers to have to sell their produce outside. So it could be centers, but also where schools could take part, and where kids could take part in how to plan the outskirts of such a greenhouse center.
Over there?
Good afternoon. My name is Leland Strom. I, first of all, am a farmer from northern Illinois, just west of Chicago, where on our farm we raise corn and soybeans, and we also have raised local produce for the local market. I'm currently in my 5th year here in Washington, D.C. as the chairman and CEO of the Farm Credit Administration here in the United States, which is the largest provider of financing to agriculture in the United States. It's a regulatory agency. I should also mention Ava, my wife, and I became grandparents just a couple months ago. Also first time.
It's a trend.
It is. I guess the question I have is one of the things we have been looking at our agency here quite a bit in the last year or so is the financing and providing capital equity into these types of projects. They can get quite costly, and I'm just curious, comment or experience on the amount of, or the issues that you're facing as in the forms of the financing, again, raising capital, government support, whether it's loan guarantees or some type of support for these types of projects, which can get very expensive. We are looking at it from the Farm Credit System to ensure that it has, here in the United States, the ability to get into and finance urban types of agricultural projects. So I'm curious, any knowledge or experience on this issue?
Yeah. Please.
Well,
Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, but I don't think I'm the right person to talk about it. Maybe you can add. No, I don't think I'm the right person to talk about it. But of course there are problems to get the investors. But what I can see when I'm talking about all the new cities coming up in China, for example, a lot of farmers are moving into these cities. And I think when you are planning and when you are constructing, building a totally new city, if you are planning from the beginning, you don't have to invest in that way. You can also to integrate this into other types of buildings. We plan, if we have this Plantagon or whatever technical solutions we have that are aiming at a sustainable future, you also have to educate the citizens in the new way of living. And in China, they have to educate in a new way of living. That's not what they have been aiming for, the American way or the European Western way of living. It's another way of living. And I think it's very important to educate for it.
Perhaps one could also add that, of course, there are costs to all innovation investments. Right? All innovation investments, of course. In Sweden, there are very little subsidies, but some support for innovation companies on the markets, the Swedish Trade Council, for example. That is clearly very helpful. But of course, there are problems for all innovative companies to find investors, but not as a great hurdle. I mean, in China, investors are looking for projects. Of course, then you have the IPR issue, of course, and other such issues. But one shouldn't overestimate those costs, because what we are discussing here are solutions where, like in my hometown, in this Hammarby sea city, the energy costs are coming down with between 40 and 50% compared with a normal old-fashioned type new suburb. So the energy costs go down drastically through these sustainable solutions.
So certainly, but I do think it's a matter of priorities and how does government prioritize where their expenditures go. And of course, agriculture is fundamental to health, to life. And how do you get a stronger voice, in that discussion, because it is fundamental. And I think the elements of commerce is going to force the issues, the high cost of transporting, why it makes sense to be growing inside it. But the priority really has to be in the minds of the governments to really get it going. But also, I think, we didn't wait. We did our own investment. We moved, and it's come to an amazing fruition, but it was simply our own priority as a nation. We're not a huge nation, but we are one. And it's been amazing, the partnerships and the responses have come out, and then finally we have the innovation.
Tony?
Thank you. Tony Sochi from EPA. I had a question for the panel members and you in particular, Chief. The Plantagon is a really incredibly innovative idea, and especially in its urban setting. Yet we see this trend to organic farm movement, so to speak, here in the States and I'm sure around the world. And how do these two moving pieces, so to speak, interface with each other so that they're complementary as opposed to, because the pressures in urban settings for food and everything is going to be ginormous. I mean, it's large now, but it's going to be off the charts. And so there are matters of scale here that are important. And I wonder what the scale issues are as well. I mean, what can Plantagons do really? And what do they need to complement what they can do from the organic farm movement? In other words, what's this interface look like?
To keep that, we have one. Any of you?
Yeah. I think that if you're looking at the cities, I think there will be a big question how to produce enough for all the citizens. But I think this Plantagon idea is that you can have different scales of these greenhouses, and I think you can, if you build it into the city, and if you adapt it to the place where you put it, you can adapt it in many different ways, and I think in the future you can provide not everything what you need, but you can get the local biodynamic food for the neighborhood. And of course you have to be you need the complement from the farmers and the other biodynamic producers. So I think they have to work and cooperate together. Well, I think it's.
Well, I could add that the scale is enormous. When we first started with Plantagon, we were able to compete with any greenhouse in the world 4 times the production of any greenhouse. That moved to 10 times the production, and then now it's up to 100 times. And so the large industrial size Plantagon is about 142 meters, about 26 stories, will feed 350,000 people in a year's time. It is huge. And as I was looking here, I see that the innovation continues to grow as we stand. So the innovations are building on innovation. And one of the biggest problems we had, of course, was energy. And amazingly, SWECO engineers have cut that energy down amazing. But so the innovations grow. But I think one other element that we have to be aware of is that with global warming, you're not going to be able to plant. You know, we've had that experience already in upstate New York when it's too wet, too much rain in the spring to get your crops in the ground until quite a bit later. And then, as you know, it now begins to dry out and there's no rain coming around in August. And so you're already having trouble. So there's going to come a point when the global warming is not going to allow you to plant, and you're going to have to protect the plants. So that's going to drive it, I mean, fundamentally. You just had to be prepared for that. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't hear much about that. We always talk about growth. And I think fundamentally, we're going to have to find another word for growth that's more realistic, because as we said, we're already producing or demanding more from the earth than the earth can produce. So we're going to have to find another word for that to find out how we scale back, how we reduce, and how we concentrate, and how we meet these issues, because they're going to be very practical and very real.
We are scheduled for a coffee break now. I suggest that we maybe take one or two more questions. Pardon?
We have to do it quite
A quick coffee break. Okay. Who has the microphone?
My name is Pierre Wallinder, and I came down here from Buffalo, New York, with my associate Petter Turnquist. We drove down after I read the interesting article in the Current of the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce about this project, and I must say I'm extremely proud and inspired by this meeting today. And you have touched base with some of the key components that I think is vital for a region like upstate New York, as the Chief Lyons mentioned. Buffalo is mentioned to be the third poorest city in the United States. We have a 46% graduation rate of the children. Poverty is it's a key issue that we are discussing right now. And right now we have also established a regional council for economic development under the auspices of Governor Cuomo. And if possible, I would love to see a Plantagon being in Buffalo as the first location to see this. And if possible, I would like to help you make it happen. Who am I? I am a commercial business and realtor broker. I successfully help some clients in the range of tens of millions of dollars with projects successfully over the last some years. And if we can do anything to help you make it a reality in our region, I would like to participate in it. Thank you.
Sounds like we have the right people in the right room. Someone else, I saw several hands before. The microphone is coming up from the back. And then we will take a coffee break, because this would not be an event at the Swedish Embassy without the fika.
My question perfectly follows his statement. I kind of wanted to know how access and affordability for low-income people to some of your products and your designs. And in China, what's the relationship to kind of people who are at the margins in our society? How do they have access to these goods and these things that you're creating around design and public space?
The Symbiosis City model, I can just briefly mention, as I tried to say also in my presentation, it can be applied everywhere, different regions, blocks, houses, and so forth. And it's not dependent so much on budget. There are different alternatives that are not so costly. So it could be also in low-income places that you can use that approach. So it doesn't have to have a lot of money per se. Maybe Eva would know better, but
have you done something in a low-income? I might get some examples.
Yes, we have, and it's more of a democratic process, and that all the stakeholders and all the citizens together are aiming at the same thing, the holistic, sustainable approach, and I think that the citizens are, even the poor citizens, are very involved in this type. We have done it in South Africa, for example, and they are very much involved in the process, and that's why it's a thing for everyone.